Welcome back.
Welcome to Decision Space, the only show that takes place right here, in the space between the turns of your favorite games. I'm Pete Wissinger.
I'm Jake Friedman.
I'm Paul Solomon.
And I'm Brendan Hansen.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are continuing our top 10 games of all time. Last week, we went 10 to 6, all four of us. That's 20 games. And now we will go 5 to 1, another 20, the greatest 20 of all time. As we did last week for our patrons, we did a little pre-show content where we talked about our 21 plus honorable mentions. That's not adult material, but just numbers 21 and above. We had a good chat.
There was some adult material in there.
Actually, that's true. There was some adult material, some illegal material. So thank you always to our patrons. And you can join the Patreon for free. And then at some amount of pledge level, you can check out this stuff and also get early releases to our show. This week, we got a special review. Thank you so much. This was on Apple Podcasts UK. And let me read it to you now. Although I didn't write down who it comes from. My apologies. Perhaps Jake can track that down. It's an easy decision to listen. Despite being an avid board gamer for several years, I only recently found the Decision Space podcast. Since then, I've been working my way through the back catalog at a frenetic pace. It will be a bit sad when I have fully caught up, and then have to wait a whole week for my next fix. Seriously, though, getting out a new episode each week is an amazing achievement for such a small team, and is what has made Decision Space, alongside Board Game Hot Takes, my favorite board game podcast. Personal highlight is always the What We Talk About episodes, as for me, they seem to best capture the essence of what makes Decision Space unique. So thank you so much to the person posting this on Apple Podcasts UK. And as always, if you post a review of our show, we will likely read it on the air.
And that person is Brazen Ludorum. So thank you so much.
I just want to say real quick, thanks to everyone who voted for us for the Golden Geek for Best Podcast. We did not place as a finalist this year. Next year will be our year, but I do want to congratulate Liz Davidson, whose podcast Beyond Solitaire won Best Podcast. If you've never listened to that one before, it's an excellent sort of academic interview show. She herself is a former educator. She talks a lot about historical games and games in the classroom. She recently has become the full-time solo developer for Leader Games. So she's kind of like a superstar in my book, but it's an excellent podcast. Her back catalog is full of awesome interviews with really great people. So congratulations, Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire. Well-deserved Best Podcast win. All right. So I think that what we're going to do now is waste no time and jump into the 5 best games of all time, according to the captains of the interdecisional spaceship, starting off with our fearless captain, Jake Friedman.
All right. And my number 5 game of all time is The Resistance, just kidding, no colon, just The Resistance. I don't want to spend too much time on this one because The Resistance is a game that we heard about last episode. Pete talked about The Resistance Avalon. I think that's the version most people prefer. I have always said I preferred this version. That being said, I recently had an excellent play of Avalon. I enjoy that just as much, if I'm being honest. So my game, number 5 game is sort of both. And the one thing I will highlight about the Decision Space is there are very few games that I've played that have a sense of tension turn on like the flip of a switch. And that happens every single time you play The Resistance. You put your heads down, cover your eyes, and when you come up, the air is just thick with tension and suspicion. And it's just something that every time I play it, it sort of takes my breath away of something that's just so fun to experience. And I think it's something that I want to look out for as I kind of like design games and play games, is sort of what is this game and Decision Space doing the atmosphere. And to me, the Resistance is the shining example of that.
Fantastic. Before the show, we were talking about gateway games, and I know, Jake, you spend a lot of time playing games with people that are not, you know, in the hobby as deep as we are. Certainly, would you consider that a gateway game?
Definitely. Yeah. I think it is a gateway game for like the party atmosphere, right? If
Mhm.
people are like interested in a board game night, then I'm probably not going to point them to this one. But I feel like this is almost a gateway game you can kind of like sneak in when people aren't expecting it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, excellent. It looks like I'm up next, and my number 5 game is my highest rated Phil Walker Harding game. He is my favorite designer for the clever ideas he has, but this one is Imhotep. Probably certainly for me, best work of all time. This was his second game, which is an incredible achievement. Um, this one has, I don't know if you know how to describe it exactly. It feels like Coloretto a little bit because you can either place one of your stones on a ship or sail a ship, sort of like playing a card or claiming cards. And when you place your stones, they're a lot like workers. And then when you sail them, there are 5 different locations they can go to, each with their own little mini games, and they unload. And so the agency to control where those blocks will ship and the timing of all those elements is really, really interesting. Something in the sort of Paul wheelhouse for what this game has is there's 5 locations, and each of those is double sided. So right away you have, what is that, 32 different combinations. But then in the expansion, which is excellent, there's 2 more for each of those, and now you're very high. I don't even know what that number is. 4 to the 5, something big. 2 to the 10. It's 1,024, something like that. So yeah, Imhotep, really amazing, very interactive. And my list actually focused on pretty interactive games because now that Pete is in our group, I've sort of steered that way more and more. These are the games that I could bring out on a game night. There you have it. My number 5 all time, Imhotep by Phil Walker Harding.
Imhotep was also Jake's number 26 game of all time as of this year. It's also a game that Jake and I covered on Decision Space in episode 34. And I will say, Paul, this doesn't surprise me that this is one of your top games of all time because you love Phil Walker Harding, and this is an amazing Phil Walker Harding game, but this is just an incredible game. It packs so much punch in sort of the box that it is and the time that it asks of you. There's so much game there. And I think that one of the reasons that is because there's this unanswerable question at its core. You both really want to decide what rocks are on which boats. And you also really want to decide where those boats go. And the answer in Imhotep, of course, is that you can't do all of it. So you have to figure out how to make other people do the work you want done for you, which is impossibly brilliant. So Imhotep also, I think it might be my favorite Phil Walker Harding game too. The Sushi Go is pretty good since you're a Sushi Go hater, Paul.
I'm not a hater. Hey, I'm not a hater. It's just not in the top 50. Just not in the top
That's
50.
fair. That's fair.
I just want to say, Paul, that I've not played as many Phil Walker Harding games as you, but you keep showing them to me and you keep making me play them. And this is definitely the Phil Walker Harding game I've played that feels the most like a Pete game.
For sure.
When I realized I could send a ship full of other people's rocks to someplace they didn't want to go, I was like, game on. This is amazing, right? Like I think if games can be mean, then Imhotep can be mean. That's all I'm going to say.
For sure. And I think you will really like Cacao, and I keep bringing it, but we haven't got it going.
I just have to say, since everybody else has, it's also my top rated Phil Walker Harding game. It came in at number 26 on my list.
All right. I'm going to jump into my number 5, where I lose a little bit of hipster street cred here. Paul called me a hipster on the quintessential Pete game, but now I've got to say that I've got a big IP game in my top 5, which is going to be Dune, Imperium, Uprising. I love this game so much more than I want to, right? Like looking at this game, it's like, it's a Dune game based on the movie. It's got like art of like Josh Brolin in my board game. Like, what are we doing here? It just doesn't look like the Dune game I want it to be. However, the gameplay is just too good here, right? I almost love this despite the theme, even though I like the Dune movies. I've read the first Dune book, but Dune Imperium Uprising is this incredible deck building worker placement hybrid game. And it is just so good. What's interesting is I'm not sure if this game is a Euro game. People call it a worker placement game, but like it feels Ameritrashy. Like it feels like a splashy, battle-y kind of game. I mean, the combat mechanism is so cool. Everything feels so fighty. And the Uprising is sort of the sequel to the original Dune Imperium, which I thought was good, but it didn't excite me like this one, because what Uprising adds is a way better deck of cards, where intentionally building a deck is so much more important, and there's a lot more places to draw and trash cards, so the deck building itself is more satisfying. The board spaces are just so much more balanced, and there's this excellent just competition for 10 points, which this one creates opportunities for like big splashy turns where you might get 4 of your 10 points, which is just crazy. I think my favorite decisions in this game, if we're talking about the decision space, is choosing how you're going to build your deck, because you really, as you build your deck, are forward planning what your path to those 10 points are. And there's so many points of interaction where your plans might not go the way you want them to go. But I think that just, if this is a Euro game, then it's the most exciting Euro game I've ever played. It's just, I have just never played a worker placement game, I think, that feels so much like I'm playing, a Fantasy Flight Ameritrash game. And I mean that as a compliment. So my number 5 game is Dune Imperium Uprising.
Is that, Pete, because of the freewheeling nature of Dune Imperium Uprising, or the interaction, or the table talk, or what is the salt that makes
I
it?
think it's the interaction is a huge element of it. Adding these sandworms you can pull into battle, and the big effects on some of the cards, I think, is kind of what pulls it to me in so much more of just that kind of exciting. It doesn't. It is an efficiency puzzle in a way, but it's not this kind of resource kind of optimization. Yeah, like there's nothing that like I'm just doing myself. Every single thing on the board is something you have to fight for. There's
Sounds like it has drama.
Very much drama. Yeah, there's nothing that's like, this is mine that I built, except for my deck, I guess. But yeah.
Well, Pete, so your number 5 game of all time, Dune Imperium Uprising, is a perfect segue into my number 5 game of all time, which is Keyflower. Keyflower is a game that we covered in episode 26 of Decision Space, in which I sort of took the position as key lover, and Jake sort of took the position as key hater. And it is dramatic, bombastic, and it is nothing if not a game in which you have to make the most of everything you've made, but you own nothing. Because Keyflower is an auction worker placement game in which you're bidding with your workers. And you can you're building this village of tiles that are themselves worker placement locations. To earn them, you have to use workers to bid for future tiles that you can add to your own village that will affect how you score at the end of the game. But you can also use any of the tiles in anyone's village that are themselves worker placement spots. But by doing that, you're giving up those workers forever and then giving them to whomever tiles you used. So it's this really interesting economy where you care about what you bid for tiles, because those will be the tiles that you most likely are to use in the future. But also maybe you want to win things because you just want other people to use your tiles, because you just know it's a tile that this game everyone will care about. There's lots of different ways that you can approach the game sort of tactically, because you can go in with a strategic idea in mind, but this is the type of Euro game that demands flexibility. Every game plays differently because there's a broad tile set where no two games really are going to play alike. And it's highly interactive. And also, you get this sort of cool arc of the game built in from the beginning, where you get shown some end game scoring conditions that are the winter. This game plays over 4 rounds. Can I do the 4 seasons of the year in order? Let's see. Spring, summer, autumn, winter.
So impressive.
That's the game mark of the game. That's the parents' brain talking. But this game's amazing. You get that sort of insider winter information that you get to plan for what you know winter will be, and maybe speculate on what others might be as well. The more you've played, I think Keyflower is a game that just gets better every time I play. There's a logistics puzzle also just layered over everything that I think rewards repeat play. Some folks who maybe have only played this game occasionally don't love it. Also, maybe some people who've played a lot don't love it, but I think it's great. I think it adds texture and pop. It's sort of the acid that brings this dish, in my mind, to the next level. And that's my number 5 game of all time, Keyflower.
Tremendous. A game I love and had for a long time. I don't think I'd ever want to play it at 6. I don't know if you've done that or not. This game was formerly in Pete's top 10, so it's well loved here. My question is, have you played Keyflow, which I
No.
bought and have kept instead, a card drafting version? I've only played it the one time with Pete, and I'd love to play it with you. So let's just hop on a flight, meet us at Geekway, and we'll do it. Pete says it's not as good, but hey, plays quicker and does a lot of the same stuff. It's not exactly the same, but I think you might enjoy.
Drafting Keyflower sounds great. I want to try it.
All right.
Cool.
Well, I think it's time for my number 4 game of all time. And I suspect this game might come up on somebody else's list a little bit later. If so, maybe we just talk about it together. Just anybody else got that one? Okay.
I've heard of it.
So my number 4 shows up a little bit later on somebody else's list. So I will reserve my time to talk about this game then.
Let's just talk about it now because it's my number 3. So
okay.
we'll just join forces now.
All right.
Wait, then let me jump in because it's my number 4 also.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, this is crazy.
Guys, let me just hop in real quick because it's my number 17,000.
Yeah, our goal is to convince Paul that he's wrong about this game. As a group,
what is
we're
the
going to
game?
bully him.
The game is El Grande, one of the OG territory control games by Wolfgang Kramer and Richard Ulrich. What you do in El Grande is quite simply try to claim territories, have the majority of your little meeples in those territories at the end of 3 scoring rounds. And you will do this by manipulating the board with like an incredibly interesting action draft where you play a card from your hand that determines how many workers you have available to go onto the board, and then also choose your turn order in when you get to take actions. And it's a simple mechanism that enables tons of really creative lines, interesting play, different play patterns. So the game will totally shift and change from one play to the next. I'm sure there's lots of other good bits about the mechanisms of this game. But I think the thing that makes, for me, my favorite decision in the game, and I'd love to hear everyone else tell about theirs, is in that draft order. I think like determining like which card to bid based on the actions available, based on the board state, based on where you are in the scoring round, like that is exactly like for me the search that I love. That is like the puzzle that tickles my brain so much. I love that aspect, and then to have that sort of be the main course of a game that has tons of fun table talk and interactive play is just like is a treat every time. So that's my thoughts on El Grande, my number 4.
Right. So for me, it's number 3, but I kind of debated where exactly it would land. But I knew it was in my top 5. It's a perfect 10 game. I will say that my favorite mechanism is actually, I think, probably the silliest one, which is the Castillo. I think that when I first played this game, I was like, oh, throw the little cubes in the tower. And then later you'll decide where they go. I just absolutely love the Castillo. I've got one of the old editions where it's just this like black cardboard monolith on your board. That's just awesome. But I think that, yeah, so throwing stuff in the Castillo, trying to remember how many you put in there, deciding where they go in that sort of donkey space kind of decision is just such a fun moment in the game. And I think it's just so elegant. The restrictions on where the king goes is, I think something that's just really fun. There's opportunities for some big swings with the special scoreboards. And I'll say that if you've played this game and you feel like you've kind of seen all it has to offer, the King and Intrigue card set for this game is so fun. Have you played with that, Brendan?
I thought you were just talking about the king, which I think is an amazing mechanism, but I have not. I should.
Oh, so yeah, the King and Intrigue cards was an expansion for the game that essentially everyone builds their own deck of special power cards instead of
Mm,
an open draft of special powers, and they're connected to your bids. So
mm,
it's just a really cool kind of. It's not for new players, right? Because it requires you to upfront kind of create this, but then people have different powers that they've chosen, or maybe they chose the same ones. It's really, really great. But area majority is one of my favorite mechanisms, and no game has done area majority better, I think, than El Grande.
El Grande really is the area majority game that all other area majority games, to this point in time, now like over 20 years, over almost 30 years later, still compared to. It's still El Grande, right? When I play an area control game, this is the measuring stick. Would I rather have just played El Grande? That's how I feel whenever I play an area majority game. And I think that for me, the reason, in addition to some of the things that y'all have mentioned, the donkey space of the Castillo, scoring the Castillo twice, having an excuse to make these silly simultaneous choices and get in each other's heads, is that for me, El Grande is the perfectly paced board game with a dramatic arc that in some ways is controlled by the players. And what I mean by that is, Jake, the system you mentioned of this hand of cards 1 through 13, where the higher you bid, the fewer troops you get to place on the board, but the better power for you, ostensibly, you get to use. That system just creates this sort of beautiful ebb and flow to the game where I have to assess, how am I doing compared to everyone else? Is this a moment where I need to push on the gas? Am I too far ahead? Do I need to sandbag this round? Can I afford to just appear a little bit weaker and not overexpend my resources? El Grande is as close in my mind to a perfect board game as I've ever played. In that, I think it accomplishes everything it's set out to do and a little bit more. So that's why El Grande is my number 4 favorite game of all time.
And I think it says something that it's on all 3 of our top 5 lists. And, we don't all share the exact same taste in games. So I think that is a big credit to this game that seems to have something for almost everyone.
That's right. Almost everyone. And look, I don't have anything to add. I was a little shocked when Brendan said it was the perfectly paced game, but it might be the perfectly paced game for him. And you guys are allowed to like it. And that's good. All right. Well, with that note, I will go next. My number 4 game of all time is probably the number 2 quintessential Paul game of all time. And that is Isle of Skye from Chieftain to King by Alexander Pfister and Andreas Pelikan. Here I have the big box edition. The first expansion to this game was so bad that they didn't even put it in the big box edition. But the Druids expansion is excellent, as are the other ones in here. The core system here is tile placement with a number of objectives that change from game to game. You have, I think there are 5 or 6 up there, and each round, certain ones of them will score, similar to a cartographer's, though Isle of Skye did this first. And so their value will sort of shift over time in the game. And you're doing things like connecting roads and connecting symbols or putting them adjacent to each other, completing regions in a sort of Carcassonne style, and collecting scrolls that will give you individual scoring objectives. But one of my favorite styles of decisions in games, and we talked about this on our, I think it was top 5 favorite types of decisions episode, is what does this cost? And what is this worth? And in this game, you get 3 tiles and you put them out in front of you. Everyone can see them. And then you offer a price on those things. And you say, I'm willing to pay this amount for this. And here's my money. I'm going to put it on the table and say, I'll buy it. And then in turn order, you get a chance to buy those tiles from other people at the prices they said, in which case they get their money back, plus they get your money, plus they get the tile. The person that buys it gets the tile. And that dynamic is just so interesting. There's some tight economics there with the way that the cash flow works. It's a very, very, very cool game. Former number 1 game of all time for me, and that is Isle of Skye from Chieftain to King.
I'll jump in because I absolutely love this game. It's in my top 20, my number 15 game of all time. And as some of our longtime listeners know, I have a Monday night game group called the Laughing Table Friends. It's 5 people, so we rotate through picks. And this is a game that I think I've picked from my last 2 choices because it's just such an excellent game at the 5-player count. And I'll just note 2 things about this game. Like, thing number 1, it absolutely flies by. We played Nokosu Dice, a trick taking game, and then this at 5 players. And Isle of Skye, definitely of the 2, finished faster, and it feels like more of a meaty board game. So that's a really cool thing. And then the other thing I would say, it's a little bit of a negative. I think it really works well, but this has probably the most ham-fisted catch-up mechanism I've ever seen in board games, where you just get coins equal to the number of people in front of you in round 3, 4, 5, or you get 1 coin for each, and then 2
Sure.
coins and 3 coins. So you could like literally leapfrog so far by just being like 1 or 2 places behind. However, it's so ham-fisted that it just becomes part of the strategy where you might be actively leaving points, shaving points throughout the game, so that you're not ahead of somebody by 1 point, because you'd so much rather be behind them heading into the final round of the game. So
I can't say that I've ever played that way or felt that it had such an impact, but it's similar to what they do in Quacks. Am I right?
I think it is similar to that. But for at least for me, this one felt, it just, every time I play it, the way I play it, the way my brain works, it feels
Sure.
profoundly important to the outcome of the game.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, there you have it.
All right. So then my number 4 favorite game of all time was previously on a list last episode from Jake. That's going to be what I think is probably the best trick taking design that exists, which is Nokosu Dice. Nokosu Dice, as Jake talked about already, is a trick taking game where some of the cards in your hand are actually dice that you drafted. I think there's a couple of elements that of the decision space in this game that just put it over the top for me. The first is that the cards in your hand and the dice in front of you are a mix of hidden and open information. So you actually know some of the cards in other people's hands, and you know what bids other people could go for. And you can maybe try and fish bids out of their dice. It's just such a cool interactive system. But as Jake mentioned, the ability to kind of have a variety of bids available to you as you play and try and pull off that magic trick to where you use your dice just right so that the one die left over happens to be your bid is so good. And in our last episode, Paul said he played this once and it didn't do it for him. And I really do think, Paul, that if you played it again, you would see the brilliance of this design, because you said that the Trump number just felt like something that wasn't interesting to you. And I think that really is a signal you should play it again, because when you're drafting, that Trump number is huge, because you're looking at your variety of bids, the numbers you have in your hand, the dice that are left. Maybe the first die or 2 that you pick from the draft seem kind of random or whatever, but by those last 2 dice that you're grabbing, Jake, you can agree with me maybe here. The layers of decisions there are just so juicy, and that Trump number system creates this kind of like unique pool of Trump every time you play, because the dice, unlike cards, are a random assortment of the numbers. There's not a set number of 1s, 2s, 3s, and whatever. So that Trump number can be something that just turns people's plans on their heads and really requires you to get creative. Not to mention the going nil in this game is super exciting and fun. So I think that everything I want in a trick taking game is in Nokosu Dice. I love it so much that I made my own dice trick taking game. It is that good. The best trick taking game of all time, I would say, my number 4, Nokosu Dice.
Yeah, I'll absolutely back you up on that. In the last play I had of this, as the draft was coming down to it, I think I was maybe second to last or third to last. And I was sitting in a situation where I was like, if the person right before me takes the 4, then I take the 3. But if they take the 3, then I'll actually go nil and kick the 2 out. And then if they take the 2, I'm totally screwed. And they take the 2 and it just put my head in my hands. So I think any kind of draft a game that has a draft in it, I want to get feedback kind of in the draft. I sort of want to know, did I make smart choices along the way or not? And I think for me, Nokosu Dice absolutely meets that bar and exceeds it. So agreed in my top 10 as well. So my number 3, we're up to number 3 already. How about that? This is getting really, really exciting, folks. Is my number 3 game of all time is my favorite light filler game of all time. And it is 6 Nimmt by Wolfgang Kramer. This is a game that has really flown up my list of all timers this year, on the back of really 2 things. I've got a group of friends that I play sometimes from college that I play online with. And one of the people in that group likes hanging out with us, but is kind of a reluctant gamer, but he loves traditional card games. So I'm always sort of looking for games that will work for all of us. And 6 Nimmt has been one that ticks boxes for uh, and I should say, and the another person in that group is the guy I've talked about on this podcast before, who's like number 1 all time in Rift Force, like leading the all-time diplomacy online leaderboards or whatever. It's like super hardcore strategist. And then on the other hand, we have like person that's like kind of a reluctant gamer. And so finding games, and I'm sort of the game sommelier. So they sort of look to me to find games. And this game is one of the few that absolutely knocks out of the park for both people on both ends of the spectrum. So I really like that, and have had an awesome time playing real time, with video chat and stuff with those guys. And then I've also been playing this over my lunch break with colleagues. I've really tried hard to like get some people who would be willing to play games at lunch, kind of step out of their comfort zone. And 6 Nimmt is also the game there that's been the most successful. And the reason for that is I don't have to explain anything at all. I can just say, sit down, here's your hand, play a card, and you'll see what happens. And that totally works, because the way the game works is you have 4 rows of cards. Everybody will simultaneously choose a card from their hand, play them face up, and then they will just be automatically resolved following a couple very simple rules. They'll be resolved from lowest played card to highest, and then each card will go into a row based on like the least difference between the card I played and a number in the row. And you just don't want to be the person that busts the row by playing the 6th card in the row. So it is so silly and fun. It has as much strategy and thinking as you want, but you also don't need to do any of that to do good. And almost as often as you make a galaxy brain play, you'll be, thinking too many steps ahead and then shoot yourself in the foot while everybody else just does the obvious thing. Total blast to play. Super great gateway game. 6 Nimmt. It's a banger.
So I've played this game a lot, and it has a factor that I so appreciate in these sort of like silly end of the night games, and that is that it's just so funny when you suck at this game. Like, and the whole table is laughing, but they're laughing with you instead of at you, because it is just one of those games where
It could be anyone.
sometimes it could be anyone, exactly. And my question for you was going to be like, how much strategy do you think there is in this game? Or is this just sort of like a goofy, silly time? And that, I don't mean that as a bad thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, this is not a quintessential Jake game, right?
I don't know. I mean,
obviously it's a number 3 for you, but if this is not the category of stuff you would identify as a Jake game.
I think that's right. Yeah, I feel like when it gets to the top of my list, it's almost like the games that like I don't really like area majority games, but I love El Grande. So I feel like this is maybe more sort of in that, where it's kind of like the exception to the rule, and then that ends up being something I absolutely love. I honestly think there's as much skill and strategy as you want in this game, but it's the type of game where you're only going to be getting small marginal edges over people. Like, it has a really interesting and intuitive scoring system where like all the 5s and 10s are worth more points. So if I think ahead and strategize as I like to do, as I enjoy doing, and saying like, okay, like there's only one possible card that could be slid in underneath me on this row, causing me to bust. But I could know for sure that if that's the 55 card, then I'm actually taking a huge risk that somebody does have that because I'll be eating a massive amounts of points, and I might not want to take that risk because of my positioning in the game. That's something one could think about, but you absolutely don't have to like still meaningfully engage with the game and have fun.
It's not a game I've ever played, but it does sound like a game I would really enjoy.
You would love it. I feel very confident.
Excellent. Well, I have here my number 3, and this is I don't know if you guys play this type of thing a lot. I don't know if the decision knots will really be into this. There's almost not that many decisions in the game, so to speak, and that is the Unlock series of escape room games. I have played dozens of these things. I haven't played a lot of the shorter ones yet, but I buy everything that comes out. We play them. I mean, it's probably one of the most played games on our Monday nights. These are just a deck of cards that you go through. You look at pictures and then find hidden numbers, and then use the cards in very creative ways. I am blown away by the continuous, clever new ideas they've come up with for how to use this deck of sort of long cards. There's also an app that the game uses. It can give you hints, and it also does really cool things with augmented reality and machines that let you interact with something in a different way. Uh, Takes about an hour, which is like a perfect amount of time. They're incredible. I've played the Exit series of games, which I know people like more, many people, but it was just a booklet, and it felt so static to me that it was not as interesting as this, which is just page after page of really cool thematic art and story. So, Unlock, my number 3 game of all time. And yes, it is a game series, so I did cheat a little bit there, but there you have it.
Okay, all booing aside, could you spoil like one puzzle for me? Because I've heard people talk about this game a lot in the past, and they always say you're like looking for hidden numbers in
Yeah.
pictures.
I mean,
Which
the hidden numbers is literally just like within that picture, there's a very small number somewhere, and you see it.
that
Those
doesn't
are not
sound
the very
great.
interesting ones. No,
Yeah.
and it
Okay.
doesn't happen very much.
Okay.
But for example, just to tell you another one, at one point in the story, there was a tower that was built, and so you literally built like a house out of cards, and when you viewed the house from different angles, things lined up, and then you would see the number 63, and then that would mean you would grab card 63. Or you flip these cards over and there's like paths, and so you puzzle them together to make a path, but then there's another card telling you that once you get to a certain symbol you flip it over. There's a lot of decoding. There's cards that show up early in the game that you don't even know what to do with until later, but also just lots of thematic stuff like, okay, we need to throw the water on this thing because then the mud will go away and we'll be able to read it. Stuff like that. It's really, really clever.
Cool.
I'll just say I've played a couple of these with Paul, and I remember the puzzle that was crazy to me was we played one where there was a card that had a hole in it, and you had to shine the flashlight on your phone through the hole while
yeah.
holding the card in a certain place, and it made like a little spotlight kind of thing.
Yeah.
You're supposed to shine on another thing, and I was like, this is bonkers, right? Like it really
That's
does
cool.
give that like escape room kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so clever. And there's one other one that has always stuck with me. In the first set, the very last puzzle relates to the UPC barcode on the box, which I just thought was so cool. There's all this like really neat stuff that they do with your phone. So anyway, there you have it. Unlock.
And Pete's number 3 was El Grande, so I'll jump in. And I'll also say, Jake, I think a lot of the sort of that type of escape room games, it's all about cross-referencing.
Okay.
Right? Like getting a thing, and then that thing might disappear for a long time, and then you'll come back to it. So it's about your brain connecting these disparate things together, and it feels like this discovery. And my number 3 game of all time, Babylonia, is a Reiner Knizia game that has these seemingly disconnected, the first time you played it could seem that way, disconnected scoring conditions, which are sort of ziggurats, cities, and farms. And you're sort of approaching these all at the same time for different reasons at different points in the game. And you could feel the first time you play this game like they're completely disconnected. Like you could build a strategic path all around one of these scoring opportunities in Babylonia. But the truth to Babylonia is that they're all connected. Everything is connected. And to build a successful plan, you have to build a plan that interlocks at least two of these systems together, taking into account everyone else's doing at the same time. This is a tiling game, right? That is in the genre for Reiner Knizia of his other classics like Tigris and Euphrates and Through the Desert, Blue Lagoon, Samurai. It's that genre. But at the same time, it has special powers, a thing he really rarely does. And the special powers come from pursuing one of those strategic paths, the ziggurats, really hard and doing well there. And those give you, whenever you sort of make a win in that area, you get one of these powers that gives you potentially a new power that you can use over and over throughout the game that might be a whole new branch of your decision tree, a new strategic path for you to go down, or it might just be take another turn. And making the decision there between what strategic power, special power to use at the point in the game that you are is really fun. The decision on your turn of managing the tiles that you use and building towards different sets, because there's different two types of tiles, farmers and nobles. Within the nobles, there's different symbols that are connected to the cities. So there's this cool hand management puzzle. I just think Babylonia is one of the most efficient games I've ever played, and that it doesn't have that many systems, and it doesn't take that long to teach, but the decision space offered by it is really intricate, nuanced, and interesting. And any position that you might find yourself in, this is a sort of search thing that I think would work well for someone like Jake. You could sit and analyze it with a whole table of players for hours and come up probably with multiple different ways that you could play from that position. But it's also bombastic and dynamic and dramatic and fun, and has this really cool scoring that ebbs and flows where you get little hits of scoring, but then it also builds towards these dramatic scoring moments where cities are scored later in the game and can completely change what it looked like the arc of the game would be. So that's why Babylonia is right now my favorite Reiner Knizia game of all time and my top 3 favorite game of all time.
It's definitely the Reiner Knizia game on your list I would recommend most to Paul. Just a little callback from last episode. I played this one once. I found it light and accessible and very nice. But like it was, I had to be honest with listeners, it was missing the sort of like comeback sauce. I felt like I had my fill of the game. And it, so I don't know. Do you feel like this has the kind of hard edges similar to a game? Because the most obvious comparison to me is Tigris and Euphrates, also on your list. Do you feel like this has, and I know you've talked about Babylonia being a game that you played with like your aunt and family.
Yeah.
Does it have enough of that kind of like spikiness for someone like me to kind of like, did I miss, was I missing something, or is that just kind of the experience?
I think that you've cheated yourself by being too good at games because you won the first game you ever played.
Right.
And I think that sometimes that can actually sour you on games, Jake, where you sort of come in hot. And then you're sort of like, that was too easy. There's no challenge here. But I will say, I think that a table of evenly matched Babylonia players, right? The board is going to be different every time. You sort of seed the farms differently. The cities can come out differently each time. The ziggurats are always in the same space. And what powers are in play can really vary. And I think that all of those pieces together can give you games that feel meaningfully different. You also play on different sections of the board based on how many players you have, so that can feel pretty different. I think that there is more to this game than meets the eye upon your initial play. And I would wager the more you played it, the more you would like it, Jake. And it also has none of the direct fighting of Tigris and Euphrates that I know for you is sort of just yucks your decisional yum. Whereas here, it's all the indirect meanness speculation.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get in your way. I'm going to box you out. I'm not going to hit you. And I think that, so I suspect if you play this more, you would like it more than you do now.
Well, I would love to play it again, specifically with you.
Great.
So let's make that happen. we've got Geekway coming up soon where we're going to get to play a bunch of our top 10 games. Maybe next year we can just all agree now, if Brendan comes to Geekway, we will play all 10 of your top 10 games of all time.
Oh
That would
my
be
God.
awesome.
We'll do
That would be
Brendan,
amazing.
Brendan Fest. Get him out here. We got to get him out here. Okay. So I understand I'm asking for a lot when I say, like, yeah, make it spiky, but not that spiky. You know, so that's
Thread the
kind of where
needle
I'm
for
at.
me personally.
But one game that absolutely does thread that needle for me is my favorite Reiner Knizia game of all time, Raw. And I've got this big
Nice.
boy box right here. I think Raw is another one of those games that's maybe is not a quintessentially Jake game. Maybe it's far from it. But it sort of breaks from the norm and ends up being a game I absolutely love. It might be my favorite political game. And I'll talk about that.
Political
Yeah.
game.
So here's what I mean by that. In Raw, it's a pure auction game where you're given 4 sun discs. This is all you have to auction with. You can, or 4, you get 5 with fewer players, but you just get a few numbers to bid with. They're all kind of balanced evenly. So if you have the 1, you might also have the highest number, but everybody has different numbers, so there can't ever be any ties. We are collectively filling a pot that will be the thing we're bidding off each turn by drawing a tile out of the bag or declaring raw. And that would start an auction. And those are the only 2 things you can ever do on your turn. Sometimes you don't even, sometimes you don't even get that choice because you'll draw a tile and it'll be a raw tile. And then raw is declared anyway. I think my favorite decision in this game, the thing I love so much about the decision phase is that even though, you know, it has a very, very rigid auction framework, it feels like it becomes political because once I've gone out early, I will spend the rest of my time in that round just badgering everyone around the table, being like, Brendan, you have to go in here. You can't just let Pete. He's still got the 15. If you just let him fill that thing up, he's going to get everything he wants. And that's sort of the table talk that just ends up happening. That's kind of created out of this game, and it doesn't feel annoying when people are badgering each other, trying to get them to do what they need, because we have such blunt instruments, right? You have only the tiles that you have, only the auction numbers that you have, which are never what you want to bid. That when you're trying to communicate to somebody to like tell them what to do in the game state to not let Pete run away with it, like they are also bound by their incredibly blunt instruments. So it's a game that feels simultaneously like very tight, but also like very raucous and loose in the table talk variety. And then the way the auction works, the way the push to luck element happens in the round makes it incredibly exciting to boot. So my favorite Knizia game and my number 2 favorite game of all time, Raw.
Great game, incredible designer. One of the things that I love in that game is obviously that there's this amazing thing that the discs you bid with will determine what kind of discs you get next to use next round. But something that I've found over repeated plays is how good it is to have low valued sun discs, actually. And I think that that's such a clever little surprising twist. Well, I'll go ahead on to my next one. This is my number 2 game of all time, designed by Bruno Faiduti and the great Alan R. Moon. This is Incan Gold. My number 2 game of all time plays 3 to 8 players. It's amazing at all player counts because of its naturally robust, self-balancing core mechanism. This is a press your luck game at its absolute core. A deck of cards, half of them are good. They're giving you gems, and then half of them are bad. There's 5 types of bad stuff. And if you ever reveal 2 of the same bad thing, then that's bad. You bust, you get out of there. The way someone described this to me the first time I played it, which I'd still say, is the first time you see something bad, it's just spooky. The second time, it's terrifying, and you drop everything and run out of the temple. The things that I love in here, you flip over a card and it says you found 10 gems, and so you split that up evenly among the players, but the remainder is left in the middle. And so what that means is with more players, the remainders will be large. I don't want to get into the math here, but when there's 8 players, the remainder could be as high as 7. And then players make a decision to stay and continue on the temple or leave. And this is a simultaneous reveal, which is fun, and you can have head games. And then you continue to do this. But as these remainders pile up on the cards, players are incentivized to leave the temple because on your way out of the temple, you can grab all of the tiles that are there. But then again, if 3 of us leave at the same time, we end up splitting the things that are there. And then the players that are left in the temple now get to explore on their own. And so if just Pete and I are in there and we find the 17, that's 8 each, which may be really, really good. And if I'm in there by myself, now I can just try to keep going, pushing my luck, getting big wads of gems just for myself. But of course, if I bust, I lose it all. So the fact that this thing, the core tension of each of the rounds is this: towards the end, how far can they push? Will it get down to just one person? And it's easy to get down to one person with like 3 players. But when there's 8, it's shocking that you still do get down to 1 players because the remainders incentivize players to leave. That's really clever. There's a new edition with some expansion modules I haven't played yet, but there is one module in the game that's really cool called the relics. The relics are 5 or 10 points, which is good, but you can't split them. And so if 2 people leave at the same time to try to claim a relic, they pull on it and just drop it right there. Really, 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 really cool game. Literally has never not been a hit for me. Incan Gold.
I think that what's great about Incan Gold and then even Jake's mention of Ra is that both of these games I think can just be so funny because they both have a push your luck element that just leads to light, funny moments at the table. Like I remember playing Ra when I just had bad chips and I just like called for an auction every time it was my turn just to like force all these suckers to like let me have this, right? And Incan Gold's a similar thing where you're just playing these mind games with the other players around the table. And with 6 Nimmt being mentioned, I think it's so great that our top 5s have all of these funny, interactive moments in them that I think that, while we kind of get into the big brain kind of strategies here on Decision Space, you can't deny that just having a goofy, silly time with your friends is kind of an unbeatable kind of game night. I'm going to move on to my number 2, which is my favorite card game. It is my favorite 2-player game. And I think anyone who listened to the deep dive ladder climbing episode knows that I love Haggis. Haggis is a ladder climbing game by Sean Ross. It plays very well at 2, 3, or 4 players, but the meat of this game is the 2-player experience. What I love about Haggis is that it is just so rewarding to play over and over again. I will say that every time I log onto Board Game Arena, I see if there is someone waiting for a live game of Haggis, which is very rare, but I get so excited when there is. And sometimes me and that person, I'll just always ask for a rematch. And sometimes I'll just end up playing with someone I've never met the most beautiful games of Haggis. And if they're worse than me, I just stomp them to death over and over again. And that's also fun. But finding an equally matched player of Haggis is just a beautiful thing. It is a ladder climbing game that is just so deep. It is so timeless. The way that it utilizes the face cards, which can be used as wild or bombs, create so many decisions in what is essentially just a cards with numbers game. In fact, this game is so good that Brendan and I's discussion of this game led to us doing an entire episode on player expression. A cards with numbers game led to a discussion on player expression. And it's just that special. I can't recommend enough that people check out my favorite card game, Haggis.
Haggis is just delightful because at its core, it really is a conversation with the player sitting across the table from you. And my number 2 game of all time right now is Broom Service, which we've covered already in our top 10. And for me, it's that. But Broom Service is a conversation with everyone else at the table up to multiple 5 players all at the same time. And there's it is chaotic at higher player counts. There, it's this sort of raucous shouting match in a bar where you're trying to, get your word in, maybe a little bit like this podcast. But it can also, play cleanly and nice with this discussion type feel when you're playing it too. I think it's fun, it's quirky. For me, the joy of Broom Service is also, yes, I love the sort of way that you all pick your cards all at the same time, where you make this simultaneous choice and then you resolve them slowly. The way you have to declare when you play a card if you're brave or cowardly, like we talked about last week, changing the effect, taking a risk, making you vulnerable if you've guessed wrong about what everyone else behind you will do. When we covered this game last week when it was on Jake's list, we talked a little bit how in some ways the logistics puzzle of the board fades away. And while I think that's true, as someone who really loves spatial games, for me, the way that the design of the front side of the board creates these organic choke points that push players together and allows you to focus on certain terrains that people are in, sort of take and elevate a great game and make it incredible in ways that it's hard to really even digest until you've played it a ton. And then once you have played it a ton, like Jake said, there's about what feels like 20 expansions in the box. There's just so many different ways that you can take Broom Service and add a little taste of this, or add these interesting little charms that change the way the game plays for your group. And I think Broom Service is maybe the best card-driven board game I've ever played. So that's why it's my number 2 favorite game of all time.
Yeah, I've already talked about it last week. Absolutely love it. It just gives such great feels. Like there are a few games that just have moments where you're just like, you know what, I'm brave. I'm gonna be brave, and then it comes all the way through, and you just feel incredible. So totally agree with you. I think an excellent and very worthy pick is your number 2. So we are at the part of the episode where we're all going to share our number 1 game of all time. And I know, oh yeah, let's hit them with the sound. What sound? This sound? All right, that's some applause for our number 1 games of all time. So a lot of decisionauts, our listeners are not going to agree with me for my number 1 game. That's okay. I know they won't, because I don't believe this game even made the top 10 games of the early aughts when we did that list. And yet it's my number 1 game of all time. Or what did we do? I can't really remember. My number 1 game of all time is Tikal.
Wow.
An excellent game by Michael Kiesling and Wolfgang Kramer. So I guess just to close the loop on that, I didn't know it was going to go this way, but I ended up with 3 Wolfgang Kramer games in my top 5, kind of giving him a commanding lead this year for my top 10 list. So I think that's probably the first time that I've had that kind of shakeup happen. But I want to talk about Tikal. It's a game I've already talked a ton about on this episode. I mean, on this podcast, not so much this episode. And it is kind of, I've been all my other games have been games that maybe like don't feel like quintessentially Jake games. Well, this one definitely is. It's not a super raucous fun time with your friends. It really is more of a heads down, brain burny, like we're gonna get together and do some serious board gaming. And think really hard in like a hopefully well lit, but sort of like that kind of like dark, dusty, well lit room. And so in Tikal, it's a game that famously has an enormous action point allowance of 10 action points every turn, and a whole menu of options of different things you can do, different costs with actions. You play as kind of like an archaeology school, going around trying to dig up temples, control those temples, collect ruins, forcibly trade ruins with your opponent, to end up scoring the most victory points on over the course of 4 scoring rounds. I think the reason that I've loved this game so much is that it's the first few plays of this, it kind of was like, I was like, that's really interesting. But it's just grown as I played it. Every time I probably played it, my copy on the table 5 to 10 times now. I've played it many more times on Board Game Arena, and it feels like a game that I'm learning about every time I play. I love how like organic and fluid that action point system allows you to be. And I think the thing that I love most of all about this decision space is it feels so unique amongst all the other games that I'm playing at game night. It really is a relic of its time, for better or worse, right? It was built in a time when games were made to stand up to infinite repeated plays. So much so that this game has an auction variant where once you've played it so much, you can do a victory point auction for tiles every single round, just like putting the complexity and calculatory nature and search of this game up to 11, which is something I thought, who would ever want that? And I'm here to tell you, like, I'm here. I want that at this point in playing the game. So it's a polarizing one for sure. Though I think everyone I've showed it to has at least had a good time with it. It's a high recommend for me. I think it's my favorite game of all time, and one that I think has merits on its own, just totally independently as a game, but also shows that there is something like really interesting that was happening in this era of board game design that in and of itself is worthy of exploration, whether you want to go the Tikal or the Torres or Mexico route. All great games, all by excellent designers. And that's my number one game, Tikal.
Wow. I have not played this game. Pete, have you played this game?
I have not.
Wow.
Sorry.
And it's okay. Does this make, did you say this was Kramer or Kramer and Kiesling?
This one is Kramer and Kiesling. The other ones on my list were just Kramer alone, or Kramer and Ulrich in the case of Grande.
So does Kramer become your number one designer of all time?
As of right now, I will say yes.
Very cool. I had Miyabi in my top 10. That's a Kramer right there. Anybody else got him in the top 10?
Exactly. Yeah, we all had El Grande. So
El Grande. Yeah, I've heard of that. Well, excellent. Congratulations, Jake, on the new number one. Very exciting for you. My number one game of all time surprised me, I will say. I went through the pub meeple. I did not expect this to happen, but it did. It has not been a previous number one, as you might imagine. I sort of held my tongue as Jake talked about his number two. This is Priests of Ra by Reiner Knizia. Now, this is, of course, exactly the same game as Ra with the same bidding system, but a totally different tile set that I think is slightly superior. I would play both. I love both all the time. This one is a little more beginner-friendly, less punishing. The big differences here are that the tiles are almost entirely double-sided. And so you get a couple additional points of agency when you draw a tile out of the bag. You decide whether to put it which side to put it on. And depending on these priest tiles that you draft, you might be able to flip tiles over, which is very important for the set collection. There's actually, I think, fewer types of tiles in this game than in Ra, which means there's a little less to think about, and it's a little bit easier to get the types of things that you need. If you look at the fact that they're double-sided, it's probably maybe even slightly more types of illustrations you could have. But as far as actual tile types, it is smaller. Everything that Jake said about Ra is true. It is a genius and masterful design. Priests of Ra is less well known. I pray that 25th Century comes out with this and Ian O'Toole does the art. I've been pushing for this. I saw a copy of this for sale for $5. This auction started at $5 in the Geekway virtual flea market, and I talked it up, and now it's up to $30. So I'll take my 10% on that one.
I have only played Priest of Ra once with you, Paul. I kind of would count it as the same game because they're so similar
For
on
sure.
my list. So like you might as well consider this my number 2 of all time. I've only played it once, but I think I agree with you. I think I like the tile set more, which would mean I like Priest of Ra even more than Ra. But having only played it once, it just didn't make sense to like pick that over the version I've owned and have played a ton.
And Decisionauts, if we're going to see you at Geekway to the West this week, well, we're going to have a top 10 games night. So I can bring Priest of Ra. We can get it to the table. You can see how much you like this thing. I love it. It's my favorite game of all time, Priest of Ra.
Well, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised to hear my number one game of all time. It's got woodland creatures. It's got variable player powers. It is shot up the top of the board game charts. People all over the world love it. You know it. Arc Nova. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, no. It's Root. For those of you watching on YouTube, I'm literally wearing one of my 3 Root T-shirts right now while we do this. Here's the deal. Root is a lifestyle game. It really is. I think that this is the most rewarding game out there. It is got what everyone always talks about is the asymmetry. And yeah, of course, the asymmetry of this game is totally incredible and impressive. This is, I think, the most successful game that is this asymmetric that I have seen. And it is this war game that is intensely competitive. Like there's a competitive tournament scene for this game, and people develop metas, and they say, oh well, if this faction is in there, we got to match them up with this, and people draft their factions when they're playing this competitively because the game just runs that deep. But I think that when people talk about the interesting asymmetry and the masterful design and the competitive tournament scene, what I think is maybe lost is that this game's just fun. It's just a fun game, and it has more emergent narrative than I think any game that I have played. In terms of the decisions of the game, I think the huge decision points that are great in this game is not just how does my faction work, but how do I position myself to win this game? Because this is kind of a game where people have to kind of let you win, because you do have a lot of flexibility to kneecap somebody if you need to. And it is a political above the table game. And actually something we haven't talked about, I think, enough in this top 10 is that Root's theme and presentation is, I think, unparalleled. I do not think that Root would be the hit that it is without Kyle Farron's art plastered all over that game and these cute little wooden meeples that you move around. I think that the mixing of what is this like heavy war game with these cute woodland creatures just draws people and makes people want to play it, even if it's not their type of game. It just you want to dig in. And I remember when Shut Up and Sit Down reviewed this game, Quinns said that he felt like he was getting to a point to where the game wasn't as fun because he thought that the fun part was sort of like learning the game. He felt like learning the factions and watching how they interact was more fun. And once you actually know how it works, it's that fun kind of fades away and it maybe isn't worth the squeeze. And I think that Quinns was just wrong. I think that this is a game where the deeper you get into it and you play it with people who all intimately understand the systems of this game, there is no more rewarding, funny, exciting game that exists out there. It is just that good. Like I will never turn down a game of Root ever. I even will teach Root. I love this game so much. People are like, "Oh, I don't want to teach it." I'll teach it. If you want to play Root, come to me. I will teach you Root. I will spread the gospel, the good news, and let everyone know that while Cole Worley has obviously made himself into a superstar, and you watch these videos where people go on and on about how great John Company is and how his historical games are so interesting, or how the campaign is so ambitious in arcs. Those are all true. But I think none of those games are just as fun as sitting around and playing Root. My favorite game of all time, a masterpiece.
Fantastic. And surprisingly to all that listen to the show, Pete actually got me to play Root just 6 days ago. We played it And here's what I'll say. I can 100% understand exactly why you like it. I was not as dissatisfied with the play as I expected to be. I thought that I would come in. I mean, you know this, Pete, but I said, sure, I'll play it, but I'm just going to go willy nilly, do all kinds of nonsense and king make whoever I want. But I found the Corvid Conspiracy faction that I played fairly compelling and pretty simple in what they wanted to do. And the objectives were, it had a little bit of a Build-A-Bear structure to it where I was, developing. Of course, it had this not monotonic development. It could be destroyed, and it was. Ultimately, I think I got very close to winning, and it was Pete's campaigning that he and Pete lost just miserably. He played
Oh my gosh.
pathetically. You should all know this.
Okay, so just for people who've played Root, I was the birds,
Burbs.
the Eerie, and I turmoiled like 4 turns in a row. Like
Yeah.
they decided I made the mistake in Root of getting off to an early lead. It's kind of like Mario Kart, where you don't want to get off to an early lead because the blue shell will get you. You have to kind of play to the middle of the pack, and I didn't do that. And
Right.
they blue shelled the hell out of my beautiful bird kingdom.
I found that I was mostly just in a position to attack your cardboard, which is a big thing that's going to cause you to turmoil. But it's also just naturally incentivizes. I mean, I thought the core systems of the game, the thing that always happens in the game where you're moving and interacting and fighting and those things, I thought those were very compelling and strongly incentivized. And you're 100,000 bajillion% right about the presentation. Without that art, without that theme, this would not work. If this was just sort of like, Warhammer type, Space Marine type fantasy world, and we have these factions attacking in some space opera, it would just be whatever. But I really enjoyed it, and I'd be happy to play it again sometime after 6 more of my take a tile, place a tile games.
And I'll just have everyone know, Brendan just showed me that he downloaded the app while I was talking, and Brendan and I are going to play Root. So you only need to look for more decision space Root content. Because Brendan, were you just salivating as I was talking just then?
So yes, but I have played Root. I've played it a fair amount on the app, and I've played it asynchronously with Jake online, and I was a Crows. And I think that Root will never be the app is never the right experience for Root in any way, shape, and form. But I think having just played a few times, for me, Pete, the promise of Root is this game that innately sort of distills this idea that who you choose to play as in a game, right? Character selection. It in some ways, like, Root is about who I am is about what I can do. That's really true, right? You feel that in Root. When I play the Crows and I'm sneaking around trying to lay traps, and I could maybe be hiding bombs, or I could maybe be hiding snares, I feel a certain way when I come to the table because of what I can do, my agencies. But I also feel a certain way at the table because of what everyone else can do to me. My relationship to others and what they can do is just as important in Root as what I can do. And I think that's what makes me want to play Root more. One, and then also just the fact that I'm smitten with the fact that the art's adorable, and it takes me to Redwall, and I can imagine, these warlord mice being an entire book that I would have read when I was 10. And then also having this innate, to you, Pete, like this, you mentioned the connection to wargaming. And I think because of that, it gives you this really classic feel. So everything about Root just sort of says, I'll reward you for the time you put into me. And to me, that feels like a sweet deal for a game to make with me.
Okay, so one more note from me on Root. I think that the most impressive thing about the game's asymmetric systems is that it makes the world of the game feel vibrant and alive in an interesting way every time you play it. Like the faction mix that's in there feels like this could be the game.
And then the map is like 10 nodes.
different factions. There's 10 different factions.
Yeah.
And so it gives you the feeling of, in a historical game, you feel like, oh, I'm playing in something that's alive, and I'm playing in something where, there are realistic interactions between different actors, and the fact that they pull that off in a game with way fewer rules than most war games, and where a battle is literally just rolling 2 dice and one person gets the high number. The amount of just like of a ecosystem that it shows you is just super cool.
Yeah. Awesome. So that's why Root's your number one game of all time, Pete. Which I think brings me to my number one game of all time. So I'm going to go to the game we covered on episode 155 of Decision Space.
I know that one.
Yeah?
No.
You talked about it a lot tonight, or in these past two episodes too, counting this one, which is the Resistance. We've talked about it a lot. So the Resistance, it's this party game in which I take on the role of trying to either suss out who wants to betray me or figure out how to betray people at the table. I think that I don't want to we've talked about it enough, and I've given all my thoughts on it in episode 155. So if you're curious about the Resistance, if you haven't played the Resistance, listen to that episode. That episode is actually called You Should Play the Resistance. And I don't think it's a game for everyone. There's things that this game asks of you that are a bit much. And I can understand why someone wouldn't want to play it all the time. But for me, the Resistance is the most dramatic game I've ever played, both because it casts you in a role that as a human, we're all equally capable and willing and able to play without much briefing at all, any briefing at all. Not that we're all equally desiring of that or skilled at that, but it's sort of equalizing. And it just ebbs and flows in these memorable ways that there's games of the Resistance that I've played over 13 years ago now that I'll never forget. They're just part of how I think about games. And for me, that's why right now, the Resistance is my favorite board game of all time.
I absolutely love this. Two questions. My first question is, do you think it's more fun to be a good guy or a bad guy in the Resistance?
Equally wonderful in different ways, right? So equally wonderful in different ways. Because when you're a good guy or, on the team of the Resistance, you
Sure.
get to just have the experience of sort of sheer camaraderie in the face of a threat that you all vanquish together, right? And I think there's something really amazing about setting out to just vanquish people actively trying to subvert what you're doing, who are at the table with you, using the most basic mechanisms of our human experience. That just feels amazing. And then when you're betraying people, your heart's palpitating, you're probably sweating, trying to hide the fact that you're perspiring, figuring out a new way to lie to the same table that you've maybe played this game with 3 times already that night, and feeling like you are a mastermind. If you win as a spy, you just feel like you've accomplished something. Truly accomplished something, right? It's cool to win a board game when you build something amazing that you've never done before in that game. But when you figure out a way to deceive people who, like your friends, your family, your partner, feels amazing. I've never beaten my partner in this game. I'll never do it.
I can never play this game with my wife because she would be so disturbed by the lies I told her. But
Maya just always knows when I'm lying.
She can never see that part of your heart.
My other question is, have you ever gotten in a moment in this game where you just decide now is the time for me to competitively lie against another person because I am going to say this person is a spy and I think that I can turn the whole table against this person? Have you ever just gotten the rush of pulling that off, and did it make you feel gross?
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the coolest things about this decision space is that there is that inflection point, and oftentimes it fails, right? Oftentimes you don't pull off that feat, but when it goes well too, it's not something typically that you've planned, right? You don't sit down and say, okay, I think we're really building up to I'm going to betray this person. It's just you see the mob mentality kind of take over, and you're like, oh, I can be the tiny push on this domino that's going to make the whole table act completely differently. It's amazing, and it feels horrible in a great way.
Are there other social deduction games that you like or have played?
I
This
really
one
like
is one
yeah.
that I've only played it one time. Really didn't have a great time. Not super interested in returning to it, but I've played Secret Voldemort a lot. I've played Deception Murder in Hong Kong a huge number. I recently played it. It was very high on my list this time. Werewords a ton, and I enjoy all those. So I'm wondering if
Yeah.
you've played them, where they fit in.
So I grew up playing Mafia a lot on sort of band trips on the bus, and it was an amazing social experience, but I found the game wanting always. Just I don't know if we played it right. I was like 12 or whatever, and it was some folk game that someone taught me, but I always wanted it to be clean and tight. Then I've played Insider a fair amount. I really like Insider. I think Insider is a good game, a great game with a good twist that just holds it all together.
And that's
And
basically what Werewords is.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
Insider with some extra stuff.
I haven't played. I've played Secret Voldemort. I like that, by the way.
Is Secret Voldemort, Secret Hitler?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
It's fine, but it's and then I haven't played Deception and Murder in Hong Kong, but I've always really wanted to.
Oh my God. That is just, to me, here's why I like it more than the Resistance, and it may be the exact reason you would like it less, is that in the Resistance, there is mostly, if not only, the social element.
Yeah,
You
you're
can
the
read
piece.
very little, right? It's like, okay, the first mission went off. Did somebody float it, or were they both good, or whatever? There's sort of like the first round has a couple of little. It's like
Yeah.
a little almost okay. But in Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, you have these cards on the table that interact with the game, and so you start telling stories about those cards. And so when I do the thing that Pete is talking about, I'm a bad guy and I want to pin it on you. I have to do it through these cards and talking about, but then there's also the layer of like, Brendan's not even trying to solve the mystery right now. Like, do you guys see that he's just not even talking because he's just trying to, So I like that mix of there's something concrete that we're talking about and discussing, but also the social stuff on top. It also plays like a 13 bajillion players, especially with the expansion.
Yeah. No, it sounds delightful. I feel like I would really love it. I
So
should
hop on the
play it.
flight. We'll play it Friday or Saturday at Geekway this weekend.
Yeah, perfect. It sounds good.
Okay, cool.
And that does it for the greatest games of all time. A surprising amount of overlap here in the top fives. Jake, Brendan, and I each had 2 crossovers in our top 10 as a trio, which really does make Paul the odd one out here in this group.
Always. Yep. I want to wish a happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. A lot of moms that we all love, very appreciative. And especially Jake's wife. This is her first Mother's Day with a child of her own. Exciting things coming up, as you've heard. Geekway to the West is this weekend here in St. Louis. Pete, Jake, and Paul will all be there. In fact, Gamehead is actually soft launching our line of games this weekend. We will sell our first copies. Very, very excited about all of that. More good things coming up on the Decision Space podcast. And of course, for the patrons, we'll have a little more post-show content. Stay tuned for that. And until next time, thanks for listening. Keep on making those decisions. Bye-bye.